إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. أما بعد. Just as da'wah should be lenient and it should be based on wisdom, sometimes, at times, wisdom entails that one is harsh. So that at times, one can be harsh in da'wah. You can't deny that. The same story we use to show that da'wah is wisdom and it should be conveyed in kind, in a best manner. Also, those same stories, and many of them, show that there's an aspect in da'wah that's harsh. It's exceptional, yes, but there is a part of da'wah where there is harshness in it. Musa alayhis-salaam, the story of Musa alayhis-salaam, when he was ordered to go to Fir'awn, we said, فَقُولَا لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا. Musa, at the end, and this, a lot of people try to hide it. When Fir'aun got belligerent, when he got arrogant, when Musa sort of hit the end of the channel with him, when he got arrogant with Musa, Fir'aun said to Musa, وَإِنِّي لَأَظُنُّكَ يَا فِرْعَوْنُ مَسْحُورًا. Musa, come here. What? He said, I think you're bewitched. وَإِنِّي لَأَظُنُّكَ يَا فِرْعَوْنُ مَسْحُورًا. He's mocking him. He's ridiculing him. What did Musa say? فَقُولَا لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا. Wisdom. But over here, what did he tell him? He said, Musa replied to him and he said, I think you, Fir'aun, this is Musa talking, I think you're doomed, you're cursed. وَإِنِّي لَأَظُنُّكَ. You think I'm bewitched? I think you're cursed. I think you're doomed. وَإِنِّي لَأَظُنُّكَ يَا فِرْعَوْنُ مَثْبُورًا. Mathbura. You know the word mathbura, what it means? Mathbura means destroyed. It means just doomed. It means cursed. Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma said, Mathbura means cursed. Mal'oon. Mathbura means mal'oon. It's like Musa is telling Fir'aun, you're a mal'oon. That's what Ibn Abbas's interpretation of the word Mathbura. You're a mal'oon, Fir'aun. In other mufassirin said Mathbura means doomed or destroyed. That means you're going to be doomed or destroyed. So, like Mujahid. Mujahid said, Mathbura means doomed. Al-Farra said, one who has no good in him is what Mathbura is. So yes, he told him, be kind to Fir'aun. But there's another side to it that you can't deny. He told him, be kind to Fir'aun, but there's another side that you cannot deny. Leniency in da'wah is the origin. Leniency in da'wah is the origin. And it's the majority. But don't deny that being harsh, which is usually exceptional, is also part of Islam. Only the deluded modernists and those who go along with them are the ones who deny that being harsh is not part of Islam. It's actually part. Is it exceptional? Most definitely it's exceptional. The overwhelming majority in the origin and foundation and radix of da'wah is kind and approaching people in the best. But there's also harshness in da'wah. You have the story of Fir'aun and Musa. You have the story of Namrud and Ibrahim alayhis-salaam. You have the story of the man in the two Jannah and his brother. You have the story of Qarun and his people. Many stories in the Quran and many stories in the Hadith. Sometimes in these stories, it's lenient. All of it is lenient. Some of it is harsh. Some of it is lenient and harsh. Just like the story of Fir'aun. Yes, they went to him in the west way initially. But at the end, he told them, وَإِنِّي لَأَظُنُّكَ يَا فِرْعَوْنُ مَثْبُورًا. But why? Because we said the definition of wisdom in da'wah, we didn't say it means leniency in da'wah. We said that's the origin of it. Wisdom in da'wah is not leniency. That's the origin of it. Yes, that's the majority of it, but that's not the definition. Wisdom is to put something in its proper place, in the proper manner, in the proper timing. Anyone who does not believe in shahada is kafir. If you don't believe in ashhadu an la ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, you're kafir. A kafir is a kafir. I don't know what the problem is with that. For decades, I couldn't, understand what the problem is. You don't believe in ashhadu an la. They call us kafir. If you don't believe Jesus is the Son of God, to them they consider you a non-believer, a kafir. It means he's not a believer. What's the problem if we say someone is a kafir? I'm not sure what the problem is. We have a kafir and a Muslim. Unlike what the deluded deceivers of this ummah today have been conveying. Allah in the Quran said, هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَكُمْ فَمِنْكُمْ كَافِرٌ وَمِنْكُمْ مُؤْمِنٌ. خَلَقَكُم. Creation. مِنْكُمْ كَافِرٌ وَمِنْكُمْ مُؤْمِنٌ. There's only two categories. There's no third category. There's no third category. And when anyone tells you there's a third category, know that he's either ignorant or he's corrupted in his aqeedah, and most likely the second. Yes, he's non-believer, is a kafir. But you don't go to a non-Muslim or a Jew and you tell him you're a even though non-believer, nothing's wrong with that. You don't believe in Islam. You say you're not a believer. You're not a believer. You're a kafir. You don't do that. That's not the proper method of da'wah. Or you say, hey, come here, you kafir, I want to teach you Islam. That's not the proper way of da'wah. Yes, he's a kafir, but that's not the proper way of conveying da'wah, even though you don't bargain. He is a kafir. You have to believe that. He is a kafir. But when you convey the da'wah, you don't tell him that you're a kafir. There's no reason for that to tell him that. Sometimes, even people of innovation who are susceptible of learning and possibly coming back to the path, you should be lenient with them. There are many who are bold and arrogant in their innovation, and they spread it. They're arrogant about it. When they're at that level and they want to unleash their tongues, a lot of them like to unleash their tongues on the slaves of Allah and the righteous and pious people of our time and previous times to make the enemies of Allah happy. It may be appropriate at times to be harsh with them, because matters like this need to be studied on a case-by-case situation. So yes, harshness could be to a person of mubtada', who is an innovator. But it depends if he wants to learn or he accepts the ayat in the Quran and the hadith of the Salaf and the saying of the Salaf, then why would you be harsh to him? So it's the origin. Each scenario needs to be studied and diagnosed by a da'iyah, and lectures can be given on the details of when to be harsh and when to be lenient. But you have to understand that there's both in Islam, the overwhelming. The point of this purpose of this is to give an outline. This is just an outline. The point for our purposes here is, yes, being kind in da'wah is the origin, and it's the general rule, and it's the majority. But don't ever deny that being harsh in ordaining the good and forbidding the evil may be an exceptional way to do da'wah and convey the right message to someone. Just like the story of Fir'awn. People also usually use the story of Nuh to establish leniency in da'wah, which is true. That they're going to tell you he made da'wah for 950 years. He lived for more than 950 years, they're going to say. And 950 years he went and gave da'wah, and we should be lenient like that, and like Nuh alayhis-salaam, and we got to give da'wah. Yes, he did do da'wah, and that's the majority, like we always say. وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا نُوحًا إِلَىٰ قَوْمِهِ فَلَبِثَ فِيهِمْ أَلْفَ سَنَةٍ إِلَّا 50 عَامًا. Nuh was sent to his people, and he stayed with them. How long? ألف سنة, 1,000 years, short of 50 years, which makes it 950 years. Yeah, but like the story of Fir'awn, there's also another detail to it. In his da'wah, he was very kind. وَيَا قَوْمِ لَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ مَالًا إِنْ أَجْرِيَ إِلَّا عَلَى اللَّهِ. He's telling his people in a kind way, I don't want nothing in return. Allah is going to give me my reward. وَمَا أَنَا بِطَارِدِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِنَّهُمْ مُلَاقُو رَبِّهِمْ وَلَكِنِّي أَرَاكُمْ قَوْمًا تَجْهَلُونَ. I'm not going to oust the people who are believers because they're going to meet their Lord. And I see, look at that. He stayed in Dawah. Look at the last point of the verse over here. He stayed in Dawah 950 years, but also, don't forget the other aspect. When they pressed him to drive away the believers, when they kept pushing him to drive away the believers, he called them a bunch of ignorance. وَلَكِنِّي أَرَاكُمْ قَوْمًا تَجْهَلُونَ. I'm not gonna drive away those believers. Surely they're gonna meet their Lord, but I see that you people are ignorant. He called them a bunch of ignorant people. He called his people a bunch of ignorance, which is a very harsh word. It's a tough word. وَلَكِنِّي أَرَاكُمْ قَوْمًا تَجْهَلُونَ. That's in Surah Al-Ahqaf. So yes, in Fir'awn, he was lenient, but he said mathbura. Yes, Nuh did 950 years and he was very kind and gentle in his da'wah, but also he called them at one point, وَلَكِنِّي أَرَاكُمْ قَوْمًا تَجْهَلُونَ. He calls them ignorant people. Ibrahim alayhis-salaam, he was very lenient to his tribe and his dad, and he would tell his dad, يا أبتي يا أبتي يا أبتي لا تعبد الشيطان يا أبتي إني أخاف يا أبتي. يا أبتي is a word denoting very kind way, very sweet way to refer to your dad. It's a sympathetic way of referring to your dad. It's a humble and a respectful way of referring to your dad. Yes, he did that with his dad, but it got to a point. At one point in his da'wah, what did he say? In Surah Al-Anbiya, the same man who said Ya Abati and was kind and tried to convey the message, he made da'wah in the kindest and best of all manners for years and years. But it got to a point where he said, what did Ibrahim alayhi salam say? He said to his people, Uffin lakum, Uffin lakum, walima ta'buduna min dunillah. Uffin lakum. Uff comes in two qira'at. It comes in two qira'at. The first is uffa, uffa, with a fatha and the fa. A fatha and the fa. That's one qira'ah. It comes in another qira'ah, the one we know, بالكسر والتنوين. Uffin, uffin. The meaning of it in both qira'at is al-karahiyya wal-ihtiqar. It means dislike and scorn. So he's uffin lakum. Uff, I hate this. Lakum, I hate you. In ihtiqar, I look and I scorn you. After all those years, yes, there was a portion of his da'wah where he was harsh. He said, fie upon you. It's translated in the English translation as fie. But uffin is karahiyya and ihtiqar. Disliking and scorning. What is he disliking? Them and that what they worship. Uffin lakum, fie upon you and upon that which you worship. You have no sense. Afala ta'qilun. Don't you have no sense? Isn't that a harsh way of da'wah? Yes, it is harsh. That was part of da'wah. That was harsh. In Musnad Ahmad, and the portions are in the two Sahih, when Subay'a bint al-Harith was widowed. She gave birth shortly after her husband was widowed. She gave birth to a baby boy right after her husband died, possibly weeks later. Islamic fiqh point of view, she's done with her iddah. She can go and get married. She's done with her iddah. She does not have to wait the 4 months and 10 days that a woman who was not pregnant has to wait. Abu Sanabil passed by her one time, and he knew, or she told him, that she just gave birth and she was preparing herself to greet and welcome people who are going to be asking for her hand. So he, Abu Sanabil, told her, you got to wait the full 4 months and 10 days. She thought that didn't seem right. She thought when a woman is, which she was right, when a woman is pregnant and her husband dies, then when she gives birth, that's it. She's done with her iddah. He said, no, you have to wait for 4 months and 10 days. It may be, according to some interpretation, he desired to marry her, and she rejected him. So he wanted to sort of give her a hard time and tell her, you got to wait the longer period, the 4 months and 10 days. She went to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam say? This was the man who taught a Bedouin who was urinating in the masjid. This was a man who told a man who's trying to commit adultery, come here, and you rub down his chest. You know what he said? كذب أبو السنابل. كذب. In another narration, ليس كما قال أبو السنابل. قد حللت فتزوجي. He told her, you're free. Your idda's over, you can get married. The Prophet who taught the Bedouin, who was urinating in a masjid, and brought him close and taught him, is now telling, in a most kind way, is now telling about someone, he's a liar. Why? Because the Prophet deemed it appropriate now that it be harsh on this person, this individual. In Muslim, Abu Dawood, in Nasa'i, a man got up to give some speech or give a talk. And he said, من يطع الله ورسوله فقد رشد. You know, the one we say in the beginning of our Al-Khattab. من يطع الله ورسوله فقد رشد ومن يعصهما فقد غوى. What do we say? ومن يعص الله ورسوله فقد غوى. Instead of saying ومن يعص الله ورسوله, he said ومن يعصهما. Whoever disobeys them, he combined them. He said whoever disobeys them, meaning Allah and His Messenger, is doomed. The Prophet ﷺ responded to him, he said, بئس الخطيب أنت. بئس الخطيب أنت. قل ومن يعص الله ورسوله. The Prophet said, you're a doomed khatib. You're a doomed khatib. Say, whoever disobeys Allah and His Messenger, not whoever disobeys them. Look at the small difference. He said, you're a doomed khatib. Say, whoever disobeys Allah and His Messenger. You shouldn't be saying, whoever disobeys Allah, whoever disobeys them. You don't say them, you say Allah. And it's a small mistake. The Prophet ﷺ, in that simple mistake, seen it was wisdom to be harsh with the man who said that. For some reason, it would. In another narration, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Come, go, get out. Idhab, get up and go." And in another narration, the one I mentioned, he said, "Bi'sa al-khatibu anta." That's very, to say a public speaker, "Bi'sa al-khatibu anta," that could traumatize someone who never give a public speech after that. A miserable khatib. Bi'sa means you're a miserable khatib. The Prophet ﷺ deemed in that scenario that this man needed this type of approach. In hadith, narrated in Muslim, Umara ibn Ru'ayba, the one I mentioned when you don't raise your hand during the khutbah as a khatib or a follower during Jum'ah, you don't raise your hands. Umara ibn Ru'ayba seen one of the leaders of Bani Umayyah raising his hands on the pulpit. What did that Umara say? He said, may Allah disgrace those two hands. May Allah disgrace those two hands. I seen the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam on the pulpit and he never did more than this. Meaning, use his finger. The Prophet used to make dua on the pulpit using his finger. What the point of is, he said, Umar said, may Allah disgrace those two hands. He deemed it appropriate that he was harsh in that circumstance right there. Abu Ayyub went to Salim ibn Abdullah ibn Umar's wedding. Salim ibn Abdullah ibn Umar is the grandson of Umar ibn Al-Khattab. He went to his house and the wedding. He is the grandson of Umar ibn Al-Khattab, the son of Abdullah ibn Umar. He's seen the walls in Salim's house were covered with drapes, fully covered with drapes. Abu Ayyub radiallahu anh said to Salim, the son of Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhum ajma'in, he said to him, the Prophet deterred or disliked walls to be covered, and your walls are covered. Your walls are covered, and the Prophet ﷺ deterred from that. Salim replied to him, he said, our women, these days, they overpowered us. And he began to justify it that his women wanted that and they're stronger, like many do today. Abu Ayyub refused to sit and left the wedding. He left it. Wedding, like we said, many of the ulama consider it wajib to respond to it. He left it over drapes all over the walls of Salim. That is a little bit harsh. in correcting a mistake. He walking out from the wedding, and Abu Ayyub is a companion and a well-known figure of the friends in Sahaba of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ibn Umar, when he goes on a janazah, in the sunnah in janazah is to speed walk. When your janazah is on your shoulders, you do al-raml. The speed walking in Arabic is called al-raml. Ibn Umar told the people, walk, speed walk. He's on our shoulder, we have to speed walk. If you don't speed walk and do a raml, I'm going to leave and go back. That's big words. I'm going to leave and depart you and go back and leave this funeral. Why? For mere fact, he deemed it that this was appropriate way with dealing in this circumstance at this time. In the summary of these last 2 points that I mentioned, let me repeat it. The last 2 points that I just mentioned. The origin of da'wah and ordaining the good and forbidding the evil is to be lenient. As lenient as you can be. We mentioned the verses. We mentioned the story. Don't ever deny though or cancel that there is the approach of being harsh in Islam, as the modernists do and others like them. When each method is used, it depends on a case-by-case circumstance. And really, you can go about for many lectures talking about when to be harsh and when to be lenient, and the types of people to be harsh with and the types of people to be lenient. But the origin and overwhelming majority is leniency in da'wah.